The moment I slapped my resignation letter onto the mahogany desk of Preston and Dale, I felt the weight of a decade-long lie collapse into a single, breathless moment. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. As the partner I had once admired more than my own father looked up at me, stunned. "You're leaving?" His voice, normally sharp as a scalpel in court, was now a soft, incredulous murmur. "I already left," I said, turning on my heels, before the tremble in my hands betrayed the fire in my chest. "My name is Clara Dunne. I'm 32. I used to be one of the top litigation strategists at one of Manhattan's elite law firms. That is, until I realized the justice I thought I was defending had become a commodity, sold to the highest bidder, regardless of guilt or innocence. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Hit that like button and subscribe. Yes, I know it. Sounds cheesy, but it genuinely helps the channel grow. And if you've ever stood at the edge of a life you thought you'd built for yourself and realized it was all smoke and mirrors, then maybe this story is for you. I grew up in Albany, New York. My dad was a mechanic and my mom ran a daycare. Out of our house. We weren't poor, but we lived paycheck to paycheck. The smell of motor oil and baby powder is forever etched into my childhood. My mother always said I had a mouth like a sword and a mind like a cage. My dad used to joke I could convince a brick wall to apologize if I argued long enough. When I got into NYU on a full scholarship, it felt like our family had won the lottery. I was the first Dunne to go to college, and when I graduated top of my class in law, I thought I was finally going to help the kind of people we used to be, the ones who couldn't afford justice. But I didn't end up at a nonprofit. I ended up at Preston and Dale. "You've got talent, Clara," Mr. Dale said during my first interview, his gold cufflinks glinting under the chandelier. "Don't waste it defending deadbeats. Come make real change, with real power." I nodded. I smiled. And I bought into the illusion. For 10 years, I worked cases that made headlines. I defended pharmaceutical giants from whistleblowers. I buried environmental violations in loopholes. I earned more money in a year than my parents did. In 5. But with each bonus check came a little less sleep, a little more nausea, a little less of myself, until Michael Carrington. He was a client, a billionaire tech mogul accused of retaliatory firings, sexual harassment, and insider trading. Our job was to tear down every victim's credibility before the court date even arrived. I remember sitting in a conference room with a private investigator, reviewing the social media posts of a 24-year-old employee who had accused Carrington of harassment. "She has a TikTok where she dances in a bikini. That'll make her look unprofessional," the PI said casually. I should have spoken up. I didn't. What I did instead was go home, stare at my reflection for an hour, and then write my resignation letter at 2:37 a.m., crying into my third glass of Cabernet. That was 3 weeks ago, and this morning I emptied my corporate apartment, put my boxes into storage, and took a train upstate. Without a plan, without a job, and without a clue who I was anymore, I returned to Windmere, a small lakeside town 2 hours north of Albany, where my Aunt Elaine left me a house I hadn't set foot in since I was 19. She passed away 6 months ago. I hadn't visited her in over 5 years. Guilt doesn't even begin to describe the knot in my stomach as I walked through her ivy-covered front door. The air inside still smelled faintly of lavender and lemon drops. My childhood summers came rushing back, with the force of a wave. And then came the silence. No buzzing phone. No paralegal needing last-minute notes. No partner demanding late-night strategy calls. Just me, my suitcase, and an old house full of unopened memories. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't go back to who I was. That night, I stood barefoot on the back porch, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel everything: the grief, the loss, the regret, but also something else, a flicker of possibility, and that's when I saw him, a flashlight beam bobbing through the trees. A man's silhouette, tall and steady, approaching the property line. I tensed. Years in Manhattan had taught me to fear the unfamiliar, but as he stepped closer, I recognized him, Or rather, I recognized the memory of him. Noah. He looked up, a little older, broader in the shoulders, and with more stubble than I remembered. But it was him. Clara Dunne, he said, smiling slowly. As I live and breathe. Thought I heard someone moved back into Elaine's house. My stomach did a strange flip. Noah Kent, my teenage crush, my first kiss, the boy I left behind, without a word when I went off to college. And now, standing here in the quiet dark, the past was suddenly no longer past. I didn't expect to see anyone, I said awkwardly. He nodded. Most people don't come back here unless they're lost, or looking for something. Maybe I'm both. He didn't respond, just looked at me with those same stormy gray eyes that used to make my heart race at 17. I'll let you get settled, he finally said, tipping his cap and turning away. But if you need anything, I run the local hardware store now. It's still the only place in town that sells both nails and ice cream. I chuckled, despite myself. And just like that, he disappeared into the trees again. But his words lingered. The wah. Next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping softly against the window panes, Windmere's favorite kind of weather. The lake below the house shimmered like melted silver. I stood at the window for a long time, wondering what exactly I was supposed to do now. No calls, no meetings, no tasks, agendas, or panic-inducing deadlines. Just silence. The kind of silence that felt less like peace and more like exposure. Made a pot of strong black coffee and sat at the antique oak dining table that still had Aunt Elaine's floral runner draped across it. I opened my laptop, an old habit, and stared at the blinking cursor in a blank Word document. I thought I might start a journal. Or draft an email to someone, anyone. But the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted to say yet. I only knew I needed to be heard for something other than a defense strategy. As the rain turned into a steady drizzle, I decided to take a walk into town. The distance wasn't far, just under a mile along a winding gravel road lined with dogwoods and pine. I didn't expect much to have changed. Windmere was the kind of town that prided itself on staying the same. When I arrived, it was just as I remembered. The post office was still hand-painted. The diner still had the same red vinyl booths, and a waitress named Dot who probably hadn't aged a day since I was a kid. And right in the center of it all stood Kent's Hardware and Creamery, with a fresh coat of navy blue paint and a sign out front that read, "Free scoop of rocky road with every window screen repair." I pushed the door open, the bell above jingling. As I stepped inside, Noah was behind the counter, adjusting a display of gardening gloves. He looked up, slightly surprised, but not displeased. "You found it," he said, smiling. "Didn't even need GPS." I followed the scent of waffle cones. He chuckled and wiped his hands on a towel. "So, how long are you staying?" I hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know yet. Running from something? Maybe. Running to something?" I sighed. "That too." Noah studied me for a beat longer than felt casual. "Well, while you figure it out, you're welcome to hang around the shop. I could use the help." I raised a brow. "You're offering me a job?" He shrugged. "Call it temporary community service. You look like someone who could use a project." He wasn't wrong. My fingers twitched at the thought of building something, fixing something. Anything that wasn't about winning or proving or pretending. I haven't worked retail since I was 16. "Don't worry," he said, tossing me an apron. "We pay in calories and minor emotional breakthroughs." And just like that, I found myself behind the counter of a hardware store I hadn't stepped foot in since I was a teenager. The first customer was Mrs. Alden, who needed birdseed and a replacement bulb for her porch light. Then came two middle school boys, arguing over which fishing lure worked better for base. Noah moved easily among them all, friendly, patient, full of quiet authority. I'd forgotten this version of him. The man who knew how to fix a screen, door, and scoop ice cream without losing his temper. During a lull, I asked him the question I hadn't dared to the night before. "What happened to you after I left?" He glanced at me sideways. "You mean after you ghosted an entire town?" I flinched. "Fair." He leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I stuck around. Took over the shop when my dad's arthritis got worse. Thought about moving once, or twice. Even applied to a few forestry programs. But this place, it gets in your bones. I nodded. Yeah, I forgot how much I missed it. You didn't forget, he said quietly. You just buried it under everything else. I looked away. He wasn't accusing me, just stating a truth I wasn't ready to face. The afternoon passed quickly, and before I knew it, the shop was closing. Rain still tapped gently on the roof, and the smell of freshly churned vanilla filled the air as Noah cleaned the ice cream machine. He handed me a cone, my favorite flavor from childhood, pistachio almond. You remembered, I said, surprised. He grinned. Some things are worth remembering. I took a bite and leaned against the doorframe. Across the street, a couple walked hand in hand beneath a shared umbrella. A dog barked in the distance. The lake glistened beyond the hill, quiet and still. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't New York. There were no power suits or million-dollar settlements here. Just people. And maybe, for once, that was enough. Noah, I said suddenly. Do you know if this town has a legal aid office? He raised a brow. Nope. Closest thing is the community center, but they mostly do after-school stuff and bingo. I thought for a moment. Would they let someone host a weekly clinic? Volunteer legal help for people who can't afford lawyers? He stared at me. You thinking about starting something? Maybe. Then yeah. Talk to Ellie Torres. She runs the place. Tell her I sent you. I smiled, more to myself than to him. A legal clinic in Windmere. It wasn't exactly the Manhattan circuit, but maybe it was something real, something worth building. And for the first time in years, the thought didn't terrify me. It thrilled me. Windmere's community center sat at the far end of Main Street, tucked behind a row of cedar trees and a dilapidated church that leaned slightly east, as if bowing to time. The building itself was modest. Clapboard siding, a faded mural of children playing, a flickering porch light, but it pulsed with quiet energy. On Monday afternoon, I walked through the door with a folder of ideas, hoping to convince someone that I still had value. Clara Dunne? The woman at the front desk looked up from her laptop. You're the one Noah said might stop by? That's me, I said, offering a tentative smile. She stood, extending a hand. I'm Ellie Torres, director, janitor, snack provider. Depends on the hour. I liked her instantly. She was probably in her late 40s with sharp eyes, wild curls, and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of the women in my mother's old neighborhood potluck group. I explained my idea, a free legal aid clinic one afternoon a week, focusing on things like housing disputes, employment issues, benefits, and domestic situations. I could use my bar certification, my experience, my training, everything I'd spent a decade sharpening, for people who'd never be able to afford an attorney at $800 an hour. Ellie listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. We've needed something like this for years, she said. Landlords around here don't always play fair, and don't get me started on that factory up by the highway. People have been fighting them for decades. Would the board allow it? The board? She laughed. You're looking at it. We don't stand on ceremony around here. She pointed to a room just off the main hall. It's not fancy, but if you're okay with mismatched chairs and a busted air vent, you can use the reading room for your clinic. Emotion tightened my throat. That would be perfect. She smiled. Start next week? Yes, I said too quickly. Absolutely. And just like that, I had purpose again. I spent the next few days preparing, printing forms, building intake documents, reading up on state-specific housing law. It felt good to stretch that part of my brain again, the part that thrived on logic and advocacy, instead of court theatrics and corporate manipulation. Noah checked in each day at the hardware store, teasing me for turning into a paperwork gremlin, as he called it. On Friday, he showed up at my aunt's house with a toolbox and a tray of enchiladas from the local diner. You're still using a folding chair at your kitchen table, he said. That's borderline criminal. So he fixed up Aunt Elaine's old dining set while I microwaved dinner, and we sat together on the back porch, listening to frogs croak near the lake. "You seem different," he said eventually, handing me a second helping. "I feel different," I admitted. "For the first time in a long time, I'm not performing." "Not even now?" I looked at him. His eyes were soft in the fading light, his posture relaxed. There was no judgment, just curiosity. "No," I said. "Not with you." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. Then Noah turned to me. "Do you remember the summer you left?" I try not to. "You kissed me at the 4th of July bonfire, then disappeared 3 weeks later." My chest ached. I was scared. I thought I had to become someone else to be worth anything. I didn't think Windmere could hold the kind of life I wanted. And now? I sighed. Now I'm not sure. The life I wanted was ever really mine. He studied me for a moment. "You're not the only one who's had to rewrite their plans." I looked at him, surprised. "You wanted to leave?" "More than anything. After my dad got sick, I stayed for the store, but I kept thinking, one day I'll leave. And then one day became 10 years. I reached over and touched his hand. It was warm, calloused, familiar in a way that startled me. "I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye." He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry I didn't come after you." We sat like that for a while, hands brushing, words quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to run from the stillness. The following Tuesday, I opened the doors to Windmere's first legal aid clinic. I half expected no one to show up. But by noon, there was a line. An elderly couple with eviction threats from a landlord who refused to repair their heating. A single mom who'd been denied maternity leave. A young woman whose wages had been withheld for inventory losses she never caused. Their stories flooded into the room like river water through a broken dam, and with each one I felt something returning, a spark of the fire that made me want to become a lawyer in the first place. I wasn't fixing everything, but I was helping, genuinely helping, without spin, without ego. After the last client left, I collapsed into a creaky chair and exhaled. Ellie stuck her head in. "You okay?" "I think I forgot how exhausting it is to actually care," she laughed. "Welcome back to the land of the living." I smiled. Feels good. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, as I walked to the store, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Manhattan area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Clara Dunne?" A clipped voice said. "This is Martin Heller from the State Bar Ethics Committee. We've received a formal complaint regarding your current activities in Windmere." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, what?" "There's an allegation that you're violating your former firm's non-compete clause by offering legal services within restricted territories." "That's absurd. I'm doing volunteer work, pro bono legal aid. There's no competition." "The committee will be reviewing the case. I suggest you cease operations until the investigation concludes. If you continue, your license may be suspended." The line went dead. I stood in the middle of the road, heart pounding, hands shaking. They'd found me, or worse, someone had sent them, and I had a sinking suspicion I knew exactly who. The call left me numb for most of the day. I paced the aisles of Kent's Hardware, pretending to reorganize drill bits and paint samples while my mind spiraled. I'd expected ghosts from my past, regret, shame, maybe the occasional late-night panic attack. But I hadn't expected them to send lawyers after me. I finally told Noah what happened after we closed the shop. He didn't flinch. "Do you think it's Preston and Dale?" he asked. I'd bet my last dollar. They must have heard I was doing legal work and decided to make an example of me. "But you're not competing with them?" "No. But legally, they might argue that I'm violating territorial exclusivity. I signed a clause saying I wouldn't practice within certain areas of the state for a year after leaving. I never imagined they'd care about a volunteer clinic in Windmere." "They probably don't, but someone over there clearly does," I sighed. "They don't like loose ends, especially ones who know their skeletons." Noah frowned. "So, what now?" I stop, At least until I talked to a bar representative and a lawyer. He looked at me carefully. Is that what you really want? No, I said, truth snapping through my teeth. But if I lose my license, I lose everything I've rebuilt. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closed laptop on my nightstand. Every instinct screamed to fight, to pull case law, counter-arguments, and precedents. But a small voice inside me, one I hadn't heard in years, said, maybe not every battle needs a war. I emailed Ellie and told her I'd be pausing the clinic. She replied in minutes. Your work already made a difference. Let me know how I can help. Her words gave me strength, but it wasn't enough to stop the sinking feeling. The next day, I drove to Albany to meet with a lawyer recommended by a former colleague. Her name was Denise Zhang, sharp as a scalpel and refreshingly direct. After reviewing the non-compete clause and the complaint, she looked up from the paperwork with a dry smile. They don't have a strong case, she said. But they don't need one. All they need is noise. You're not violating the spirit of the agreement, but technically, yes, you're operating within a restricted zone. So what are my options? She leaned back. You can fight it. It'll cost you money, time, maybe your peace of mind. Or you can settle, agree to halt the clinic for the remainder of the clause period and sign a non-disclosure to make it all go away quietly. And let them win? She gave me a sympathetic look. It's not about winning, Clara, it's about surviving. The system you came from doesn't play fair. You know that better than anyone. I left her office with a hollow ache in my chest and no clear plan. When I got back to Windmere, Noah was waiting on my porch with 2 paper cups of coffee and that look in his eyes that said, I know you're unraveling, so let's pretend you're not. For a little while. I took the coffee, sat beside him on the step, and didn't say a word. After a while, he broke the silence. When my dad died, I was so angry I couldn't breathe. Not at him, but at life, at time, at the unfairness of how everything just ended. I turned to him. I didn't know you lost him. 5 years ago. Stroke. I'd just gotten the shop running on my own. He never saw it finished. I'm sorry, he nodded. I tell you that because I want you to know something. You don't have to make every broken thing in the world your fault, or your responsibility. I blinked. It feels like I do. I know. But sometimes all you can do is the next right thing. One right thing at a time. I looked out at the lake. I don't even know what that is anymore. I think you do, he said. You just haven't given yourself permission to want it. The next week, I tried to stay busy. I repainted Aunt Elaine's upstairs hallway. I helped Ellie with a fundraiser flyer. I even learned how to repair a screen door without cursing, a major personal milestone. But the quiet ache never left. Until something unexpected happened. I received a letter. A real one. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You helped me when no one else would. My daughter sleeps better now. Thank you. There was no signature. No details. Just those few sentences in shaky cursive. I read the note 5 times before setting it on my desk. Then I made a decision. I called Denise the next morning. I want to settle, I said. But not with a gag order. I'm willing to pause the, clinic until the clause ends. But I want it on record that I broke no laws, no contracts. And I'm not admitting to wrongdoing. Bold, she said. They may reject it. Then I'll go public. I still have a few reporters' numbers. From my old life. Something tells me a major Manhattan firm trying to shut down free legal aid in a rural town won't look great in the press. There was a pause. Then she chuckled. I like you, Clara. Let's scare the hell out of them. A week later, Denise called back. They've accepted. Conditional agreement. You halt the clinic. They'll drop the complaint. No statement of wrongdoing required. And no gag order. I exhaled. It wasn't a victory. But it wasn't a defeat either. More importantly, it gave me time. Time to figure out what came next. Time to consider something bigger. Noah and I sat on the lake dock that evening, feet dangling above the water, I've been thinking, I said. About opening something official. A nonprofit. Mobile legal aid, maybe. One that moves around to underserved areas, operates outside their jurisdiction. He smiled, like he'd already guessed. You sound like yourself again. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I think I'm starting to remember who she was. And under the stars, I believed him when he said, she was always worth fighting for. I registered the nonprofit 2 weeks later under the name ClearPath Legal Initiative, a nod to the clarity I'd found by stepping away from everything that once defined me. The vision was simple: bring legal help to those who needed it most, regardless of zip code, bank account, or background. I wasn't going to wait for people to come to Windmere. I'd bring justice to their doorsteps. Noah helped me turn Aunt Elaine's garage into a makeshift office, stripping old wallpaper, rewiring outlets, sanding desks he found at local yard sales. We built it together, laughing, sweating, and bickering about whether or not curtains were aesthetic nonsense. They weren't, by the way. The first thing I hung on the wall was the anonymous letter I'd received. It reminded me why I started, why I couldn't stop. Once the office was ready, I reached out to every contact I still had in the social justice circuit. Community organizers, pro bono alliances, retired attorneys, legal interns who'd burned out before 30. The response stunned me. People wanted to help. They were just waiting for someone to start something. Within a month, ClearPath had a real team: 3 volunteers, a remote paralegal, and a part-time driver named Gus, who used to work for UPS and knew every back road in the state. We bought a used van at auction and converted it into a mobile legal hub, complete with collapsible furniture, a filing cabinet, and the best Wi-Fi signal money could buy. Windmere was just the beginning. We set up in borrowed library basements, community centers, even church parking lots. We served veterans trying to navigate VA benefits, single parents battling custody issues, factory workers denied overtime. Every story cracked something open in me: compassion, conviction, and yes, rage. Rage at the bureaucracy that buried people. Rage at the wealth gap that widened with every court filing fee. But beneath the rage was something stronger: purpose. Noah came with me on the first few trips, just to help navigate. But the truth was, I think he didn't want me to be alone. One night, parked behind a food pantry in Spring Hollow, he stayed late helping me sort intake forms. You know, he said as we loaded the van under starlight, you're building something that actually matters. I looked at him, sweaty, tired, and more fulfilled than I'd ever been at any Manhattan law office. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. He leaned forward then, slowly, giving me time to back away. I didn't. Our kiss was quiet. Sure, like it had been waiting years to happen again. We didn't label it. We didn't need to. We just let it unfold. A few weeks later, I received a letter I wasn't expecting, this time from Preston and Dale. It wasn't a threat. It was an offer. Apparently, news of ClearPath had reached legal circles. The letter congratulated me on innovative service design and offered a donation, a partnership opportunity, to help expand community outreach and reputational growth. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the envelope into my tea. Noah read it over my shoulder and raised an eyebrow. You thinking about taking it? I shook my head. Not in 1,000 lifetimes. They're scared. Good. I shredded the letter that afternoon, not out of spite, but because some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. By fall, ClearPath had served over 300 clients across 6 counties. We started tracking success stories: a woman who won her workers' comp case, a teenager who avoided eviction, a senior citizen who finally received back pay from a shady employer. Each win wasn't just a number. It was a person standing taller. I started getting interview requests from state bar associations, law school panels, even a feature in Modern Justice Quarterly. They called me the lawyer who left it all behind, as if that were the boldest part of the story. It wasn't. The boldest part was letting myself become someone new. At the 1-year mark, I held a gathering in Windmere to celebrate. Ellie offered the community center, and the whole town turned out: farmers, teachers, teenagers, retirees. People I hadn't known a year ago now hugged me like an old friend. Midway through the event, I stepped outside to breathe. The lake shimmered in the distance. A soft breeze carried the smell of fresh pie and bonfire smoke. And for the first time since that voicemail from the bar committee, I realized I was happy. Truly, simply happy. Noah joined me on the porch, a warm cup of cider in each hand. "You." "No," he said. "You've changed this town." "I don't think I changed it. I think I just showed up when it needed someone." He smiled. "Well, it changed you too." I looked at him, at this town, at everything I once thought I had to run from. "You're right," I said. "It saved me." And he didn't argue. He just wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and we stood together in the stillness, two people finally brave enough to stand still. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom, not as counsel, but as a keynote speaker. The State Bar Association had invited me to their annual conference to talk about legal innovation in rural communities. I stood behind a polished podium, wearing a navy blazer that didn't quite hide the scuffed heels I refused to replace. The lights were too bright, the room too cold, but none of that mattered, because they were listening, and not just the young lawyers or legal aid reps. No, the room was full of suits from firms like Preston and Dale, people who once called what I do career suicide. Now they scribbled notes as I described pop-up clinics, community-first strategies, and partnerships built on trust, not profit. I ended my speech with the same letter that had launched ClearPath. "You helped me when no one else would. My daughter sleeps better now." Silence followed. Then, applause. Genuine. Sustained. Some people even stood. Afterward, a young woman approached me near the refreshment table. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too big and held a notebook full of handwritten questions. "I left a big firm last month," she said nervously. "Your story gave me the courage. I just wanted to say thank you." My throat tightened. "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Just go do something good with what you know. That's the best thank you there is." Hugged like old friends. Back in Windmere, things had changed, but not in the flashy, dramatic way cities do. The change here was quieter, more profound. The community center received a grant after Ellie and I partnered on a Justice and Snacks event that went viral on social media. We now hosted monthly legal literacy workshops with local high schoolers, helping with logistics. It turned out teens were great at explaining legal jargon if you let them turn it into memes. Noah's hardware shop had grown too. He added a small repair corner where elderly neighbors could drop off broken furniture. He started a fix-it mentorship program for kids. And yes, he finally agreed to hang the curtains I picked out. Some days I helped at the shop. Others, I was in the field with ClearPath's new second van. And on Fridays, Noah and I made it a ritual to close our laptops, leave our phones behind, and take the canoe out onto the lake. No goals, no destination, just open water. I asked him once, as we drifted past the reeds near the southern cove, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never came back?" He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at me, calm and certain. "You always would have come. Back. It was just a matter of when." He was right. I used to think coming back was surrender. Now I knew it was a beginning. One crisp morning, as autumn painted the trees in orange and fire, I stood at the entrance of our new ClearPath headquarters, a modest, solar-powered building funded by a surprise donation from an anonymous benefactor. I suspected Denise had a hand in that. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony drew near, Ellie handed me a microphone. "Say something brave," she whispered with a grin. I stepped forward, heart pounding. 1 year ago, I thought my career was over. I thought the only thing I had left to offer the world was an apology. I paused. Looked out at the crowd, neighbors, clients, volunteers, friends. But it turns out, sometimes your life doesn't start until everything you thought mattered is stripped away. That's when you learn who you are, not who you were trained to be, not who you pretended to be, but who you choose to be. I swallowed. And I choose this. I choose service. I choose roots. I choose love. I glanced at Noah, who stood near the ice cream table holding a cone in each hand, pistachio almond, He winked. I hope, I continued, that if any of you ever find yourselves lost, you remember it's never too late to begin again. I cut the ribbon, and Windmere clapped like thunder. That night, I recorded a short video for ClearPath Legal website. My hair was still windswept from the celebration, my voice a little hoarse, but I looked directly into the camera and spoke from the soul. If you've ever been betrayed by the place you thought was your home, if you've ever had to walk away from the life you worked years to build, if you've ever sat alone in the dark, wondering what's left for you, I hope you remember this. The ending of one story is not the end of you. Sometimes the collapse is the clearing. Sometimes starting over is where your real life begins. So don't be afraid to rebuild, one brick, one boundary, one brave decision at a time. And if you made it this far, drop a comment. Let me know where you're listening from. Like, subscribe, if you feel like it. Not for me, but for the next person who might need to hear that. Starting over doesn't mean starting empty. It means starting free. I ended the video with a smile, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a homecoming.